Reading with permission of the author, Elizabeth Stevens. Oh, my dear ones, I know you were hoping for a once and done, for an earthquake, a tidal wave, hoping that if we gave it our all, a single push would be enough. That after this, we could sink back into complacency, back into the comfort of our privilege. I confess, in the secret corners of my heart, I wanted to believe it could be that easy, that justice would emerge as from an egg fully grown, not with wet down and weak wings. But, beloveds, we are chipping away at a mountain, not a boulder. Calcified structures created to oppress, control, kill. Thousands of years with this stupid idea that some are more worthy, some deserve power by virtue of who they are, what they look like, which tribe they claim. Erosion is slow work, sweethearts. Celebrate the progress, the triumphs. Celebrate also the heartbreaking almosts. Breathe. Rest for a time. Then get up and turn again toward kindness, toward your neighbor in need, toward those who are still trapped in the stone. Tell them, I won't give up. Tell them, I am with you. Tell them, for you, I will learn to eat rocks. For you, I will keep chewing, keep grinding, until the mountain crumbles to dust.
Wow, what a week. Unprecedented in so many ways. The number of people who voted, the time it took to get final results for the election, a president who will not concede, and shock for many that the race was so close. It's a time full of emotion, joy and fear, hope and anger, confusion, relief, anxiety, release, discomfort, and familiarity. I feel so fortunate that I was able to spend election day as an election judge at a polling place on the east side of St. Paul. On November 3rd, that precinct only had 1,500 remaining eligible voters after early and mail-in voting. 732 people voted in person that day, first-time voters and likely voters who it will be their last time. African Americans, white folks, Hmong and Somali citizens, security workers, construction workers, nurses, children too young to vote, and children who guided their elders on how to fill out a ballot. Speakers of many languages and speakers of one. There were folks with tattoos, one guy who had a hat acknowledging he was a vet, many Black Lives Matter shirts, and people wearing masks. For some, the task of voting looked rather mundane, and for others, they asked if they could take a photo of themselves near the machine that ate their ballot and counted it. Only 3 of us election judges were over 50. Others, many first-time judges, were young adults who heard the call that they were needed to keep the polls open during the pandemic. There was so much energy in that room. It really gave me a lot of hope. After voting ended, we were given the count. 2 out of 10 people voted for the current president. Truth be told, it was difficult to differentiate what type of people voted for whom. It was impossible to draw the line between then and us because unlike what we see on TV at rallies, the people who voted that day were undistinguishable in terms of what party they belonged to. We'll never know all of the whys at the core of each person's vote, and I believe the analysis often oversimplifies demographics, leaving out really important particularities. Don't get me wrong, I was silently praying by the vote counting machine all day, hoping that we would return to leadership that holds families like mine as equals, who will continue to create rights and protections for the people I love who are transgender, who are willing to speak of racism in our country and understand it as a long-lasting and systemic problem. However, over the past few weeks, as the election approached, I began to challenge my own assumptions about what might be called the other. My desire to rely on the joiners of rallies or the faces in commercials faded as the generalization about conservatives began to look just too flat for my comfort. The day I was at the poll, I Googled, why would Hmong people vote for Trump? It's amazing what you can ask on Google. I read about the uprisings in the Twin Cities following the killing of George Floyd, and the article said that so many of the businesses that were burned down during those uprisings were owned by immigrants, including people who are Hmong. The article said they saw a city out of control and a president saying he would have stopped it. I can already imagine the buts going on in some of your heads, but the fires were set by outside antagonists, or even though the president said he could contain them, it wasn't true. I tell you, you can have a big, long list of buts, but honestly, the buts don't matter at this point. What you may feel counters the belief. What you may feel counters that belief does not matter. Each person has the right to vote their own opinion. Perhaps their fears were as great as mine when I imagined another 4 years from what I see as environmental degradation and the erosion of human rights. Perhaps their hopes were similar to mine, the hope to open a business, to make a better life for the generation to come, to serve a community, and to live with pride. The poem that Lois just read by Elizabeth Stevens was posted on a Facebook page for Unitarian Universalist ministers. Her poem reminds us of hope, disappointment, and what we were discussing last week about this arc that points towards justice, but that arc is long. So long that we cannot see where it goes, but it bends towards justice. I love that meditation we just did, talking about our fronts focusing on the future and our backs being held by those who came before us. The poem said, "Beloveds, we are chipping away at a mountain, not a boulder. Calcified structures created to oppress, control, kill. Our work is not to give up, but it is to break free those trapped in the stones, to learn to eat rocks, chewing and grinding until the mountain crumbles to dust." I watched our puppy Reggie, who seems to pick up everything in his path, try to chew rocks. Let me tell you, the sound is unnerving, and he never really seems to be able to break them. Elizabeth speaks of these calcified structures created long time ago. They've been with us so long that it is as if they were as large as a mountain. And she reminds us, we may be chewing, but erosion is slow work that will be built with progress and almost. The arc of the universe that is long and bends further than the eye can see, and working to erode calcified structures is slow work. As much as we may have wanted, there was no miracle this past week. Tensions that we thought would be relieved may still remain on other levels as we look to the full landscape of the government at this time and what it will look like in the end of January. Originally, I was going to preach on Parker Palmer's book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, but by the end of Tuesday night, I felt like something else was needed. So I picked up a book called Love and Rage, The Path to Liberation Through Anger by Lama Rod Owens, who is a queer African-American Buddhist organizer. I can't do justice to his book, and there's just such a bigger framework than what I'm going to share today. But as a man with many marginalized identities, his own exploration in this book really sets his journey of being someone who is not as privileged as many of us. However, I do find his words challenge me to think differently about anger. I know this has been a period of great joy, but I want you to know also that sometimes those emotions we've been carrying with us for the past 4 years, potentially, they don't just go away because we've had a week of joy and some hope. He believes that it's critical that we examine our anger and that we pay attention to what is beneath it. He says, when people would come to me and say, "Oh, I'm so pissed, I'm so angry," I would help them turn their attention to the woundedness beneath the anger by saying, "Where are you hurting? What is your anger trying to protect?" Sometimes it's okay to think that our anger is trying to protect us. However, it is more truthful to think that it's actually protecting something else that's deeper than that. It's protecting our hurt. It's protecting our broken hearts. The work to turn our attention back to woundedness is this really intense, profound path of transformation, which doesn't feel as good as just responding to the anger, because the energy of anger makes us feel powerful. I know I have been in a place of righteous rage many a time, and there is a sense of power when I am there. In another part of his book, he exclaims, "I grieve every day. When I give the morning lots of space, not the morning where you wake up, but the morning of grief, lots of space, the anger has a lot of space. And the anger is like, thank you for finally taking care of the hurt." The energy of anger is still there. If I'm grieving, then I can actually channel the energy of anger, not trying to protect myself, not into hurting other people, but to rechannel it into benefiting others. He says, if we don't get to the anger, we don't get to healing. I am a lover of metaphors, and two that struck me in Owens' book included his reference to anger as a blanket. He says, "My anger feels like a warm blanket keeping me secure and comfortable above the ice coldness of the pain below it." My anger has been so helpful. It has been like having a big brother keeping me from stepping into this territory of discomfort, while at the same time taunting me to do something stupid. I love that image. Later, he brings forth the image he learned from Suzuki Roshi, who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Roshi says, to give your sheep a lot of pasture. Your sheep, in this case, is your anger or your grief. This wisdom reminds Owens to give anger a lot of room. He works to give it room to roam, or to just simply be there. I decided to address grief and anger today, not because we can't be joyful. For sure, we are joyful, and there is a great sense of relief for many of us. But I speak of grief and anger today because I believe that despite this joy about the future presidency, there is still a lot that remains below the surface, and much more grief and anger to come. Face it, in our democracy, it doesn't matter what side you're on. All of us feel emotions regarding our country in some way or another. I recognize that I haven't had the time to lean into the love part of Owens' book. I'll bring that in another sermon on another day. But I do want to provide a few of his thoughts on love as I close. Healing, he says, is learning to love the wound, because love draws us into relationship with it instead of feeling the discomfort. Healing is being situated in love. Healing's not just the courage to love, but to be loved. Just like how we heard in that meditation, the first act is to love oneself unconditionally. So healing is not just the courage to love, but to be loved. It is the courage to want to be happy, not just for ourselves, but for others. My prayer for all of us today is to recognize that which lives within us and below the surface. My prayer is that we tend to it. We give it pasture. We examine it. We begin to free it from our bodies, even if it's just for the time being. Learn to love yourselves and others, and love of others will follow. If your world is turning inward, look out and see how you can support the interconnected web of life, whether it's by tending to nature, by creating art, by helping others, or by joining movements that must continue if we are truly to become a just nation and turn the mountain into rubble. I just want to close briefly by a book. I listened to a Brene Brown podcast where she interviewed two sisters who were writing on burnout. And they talk about the reality of stress in your bodies, very much like Owen does. They talk about the fight or flight instinct and that we all have a cycle around stress. And they talk about how stress can get stuck in our bodies, but it must move through the tunnel so it can get to the light that we see on the other side. And they speak of this stress of fight and flight, like imagining a lion chasing you and everything in your body reacts. All your systems go into fear mode, into safety mode, into survival mode. And you run. And all of a sudden you come to a house and you open the door and you close the door and you're safe. And your body can release all that it's been holding with that stressful moment. What they've discovered in this book, Burnout, is that our bodies don't understand that an election or a policy or a moment in history might be telling us it's time to feel safe for a moment. And so that stress, that fight or flight remains in our bodies and we get stuck in the middle of this tunnel. We can see the light at the end, but we are stuck. So as I said, my hope today is that we don't stay stuck, that we acknowledge what these years and months and weeks and days have done to our bodies and our minds and our hearts, and to be honest about it and to examine it and to tend to it. May it be so. And amen. I don't really have a specific question. So instead of posting, one question, I would like to hear what you're thinking and what's resonating with you. I'd like you to comment about yourself, to own your comments versus pointing out what's happening with others. This is a time for us to examine how we are today. How are our spirits? Where are we in our desire for justice? And how we've managed to find love amidst the intense emotions within and around us. Katie will help facilitate the conversation.
I see Jamie raising her hand and Roger. I'll ask you to unmute.
Are we unmuted?
You are.
You are.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Roger, lean a little closer. You're a little quiet.
Reverend Laura, please repeat Owen's name and the name of his book so I can
Sure.
get it down.
Sure. Actually, while the next question happens, I'll go get the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, scanning for anyone. It looks like Richard has something he'd like to share. Ask you to unmute, Richard. There we go, thank you.
I'm Richard. How are you? I'm saddened by the fact that I find that so many of my fellow Americans put politics ahead of considering someone that is so mean and immoral. So, kind of disappoints me in humankind.
So the book is called Love and Rage, and it's by Lama Rod Owens. I will put his name in the link when the sermon goes out. There are tons of videos of him speaking. Roger, I also put it in the comment box, the chat box.
Anybody else at a point where they can share how they're feeling? I see Lynn.
I've really been thinking about the numbers of people who voted, which were just amazing. 75, approximately, nearly 75 people voted for Joe Biden, but nearly 71 million people voted for Donald Trump. And I feel that I really, really need to understand what the people who are supporting Trump are feeling and their reasons for doing that, because on the surface it makes no sense to me. But I know some of those people. I'm related to some of those people and I love them. And I really need to find a way to understand their hopes and fears, because clearly they had what they believed were logical reasons for doing that.
Mhm. And it feels to me, just as I was speaking about our anger, or the anger that Owens is describing, that it's true on both sides. And that usually anger has to do with a hope that isn't happening. So how to get below the rhetoric on both sides, how to move beyond the buts and the debates to what's at the core, what's breaking your heart, what do you love, what are you hoping for? Because the rhetoric has shown us it gets us nowhere.
I will add my thought about this idea that I can identify with sort of not feeling victory, like not feeling understanding that this is not a time. In many ways, it's not a time to rest. Right? We're not done. There are still all kinds of things that are have not blossomed yet, and so it is definitely hard to pause and rest and rejuvenate when that mountain is still there.
Yep. And I think perhaps buying into the fact that folks thought there was going to be this huge tidal wave, this huge shift. If we go below that surface, in my mind, it's because of the world we hope we will see, that we hope we will create together. So I think to just keep going to the root, like what's at the root of all of these feelings we're having or hopes we're having. Are we good, Katie?
I'm not seeing any hands waving at the moment, so if I'm missing you, go ahead and unmute. Otherwise, we will move on.
Okay. Oh, Anna wrote, I lost sight of the fact that in my lifetime, we've seen the first Black president. A woman was on the ballot to vote for president, and we just elected our first woman as vice president. When this caught up with me yesterday, it knocked me over. I feel joy that I've witnessed this. I feel sad that it's taken so long. Thank you, Anna.